Did you know that podcast interview can increase your brand visibility by 50% and more if you are well prepared? That's right. The key of creating this long-lasting impression is not just about showing up, it's about preparation. In this episode, I will show you how to prepare for your next podcast interview and crush it. Welcome back to Mastery Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Sas. This is a place where we share stories of impact-driven entrepreneurs to create that ripple effect of positivity. And this is also a place where we support entrepreneurs to improve their brand message so they can create more impact and help more clients. Now, we're going to talk about podcast interview being one of the best way to put your brand out there in front of the broad audience. And many people are going to see you and your brand with the podcast interview. And this is where you can position yourself as an authority, not to mention they see more of your brand, and this is where you can position yourself also as a thought leader in your industry. So let's be real, right? Podcast interview can be intimidating for a lot of people, especially if you've never done it before. You might be worried about sounding confident, and you may be worried about not getting your point across clearly, or worse, by making mistake, like saying the wrong thing and stuff like that. Trust me, I've been there. And many people have been there. And this episode will prepare you to avoid all those mistakes. So what are the biggest challenges about podcast interview? First off, is the nerves, right? You may be just being nervous being on interview in general, which is normal. Next is about whether or not you're going to be concise, right? To condense all the information that you want to share in such a short time. A lot of podcast interview, a lot of TV interview especially are very short. My podcast interview, Mastery Podcast, is normally almost 30 minutes long, about 20 minutes, because we have a 30-minute slot in the studio. So that technically is pretty long, but still to condense everything in such a short time. And a lot of people get nervous about not putting all the information out there, and they, that opportunity doesn't come around that often, and it can be nerve-wracking for some people. And the next thing that most people are nervous about is the technical stuff. If you come to Mastery Podcast interview, the technical stuff is taken care of, right? It is in studio and it's not virtual, so you don't have to be at home taking care of all the equipment. But if you are doing the virtual interview, what about the mic? What about the light? What about the internet, the Wi-Fi? Those technical issues can kind of make people anxious about being on an interview. And these are very, very common concerns. And if you manage it and prepare in advance, it will be okay. You'll crush it. And let me tell you a story about one of my interviews that was a few years ago, right? I was like, oh yeah, I know my stuff. I'm gonna just wing it. And a lot of people go on an interview like that and they said, oh yeah, I can just wing it. Some people can. A lot of people work better that way, ill prepared, and most people will not do well if they're not prepared. So here's the story goes. I got this very good interview spot with one of the people who have one of the person who have a lot of followers, right? So it was a good opportunity, but I wasn't prepared. I thought I can just wing it. All the things that can go wrong went wrong, except the technical part. I got the technical part down right, but first off, I didn't know it was live streaming. So I thought, well, we can chit chat a little bit. We have time to chit chat. We didn't have time to chit chat. We went boom. live, Dr. Sass going live. And I was like, what the heck? Wait a minute. We going live right now? And I was ill prepared. Secondly, I was coming down with something, y'all. I just feel like headache, fever coming on. My head was pounding. I couldn't think straight. So all the things that can go wrong went wrong. Third, I was just coming back from the trip. We went to Florida, my husband and I, and took I believe we have an event, like a 3-4 days event. And then we took a few days just to stay there, do some work and just relax a little bit. So it was it was a 1-week trip, and we just coming back from it, and we were just so freaking tired. And beside that, I probably caught something on an airplane. I couldn't wing it. It was live, so I couldn't even say, hey, I don't feel well. And it was a big flop. They asked me something, it was, I couldn't hear it. I remember I would just fumble over my words. And it was awful because I normally pretty good with my words. I normally can wing it, but I didn't feel well. I was tired and I was going through some rough time at that moment. So, and they asked me about that rough event, and I was just like, I want to cry. So I didn't feel well at all, and I thought about canceling the interview, and I didn't. You all, if you have a chance to cancel it and you didn't feel well, cancel your interview. But that my story, it flopped big time. So I want you to be prepared. I don't want that for anybody. It's awful, and it's not good for the audience. It's not good for the podcaster, and it's not good for you. So let's avoid that. So here's a way you can successfully prepare for your podcast interview, your TV interview, your whatever interview that you want to be prepared for. You want to do at least this 4 steps. First, you want to do your research. You want to research about your host. What kind of style they ask, what type of question they ask, what kind of vibe they have on their interview, right? And you want to also do the research about the podcast audience. What type of audience do they have? Is it, like casual, or is it business type of podcast interview? You want to know all that in advance. And if it's a business type of podcast interview, you may want to prepare some actionable tips for the audience, right? This is the business audience, right? You guys like actionable steps. What are the 4 steps? What are the 3 steps? You want to prepare those. Maybe have a couple of actionable type of advice that you can give to the audience. And if it is a lifestyle type of interview, you want to prepare stories, right? They like to know about story. They like to know about what is it that prepare you to be who you really are, or what happened in 3 years ago or 10 years ago that kind of move you to do what you do right now, and stuff like that. So prepare a few stories for the lifestyle type interview. And the next thing you want to do, that is the second thing, right? You want to craft your message. You want to have like 3 to 5 bullet points. And this is where people fail the most, and that's where I flop. I didn't prepare, like, yeah, I know my stuff, I can wing it. And I didn't wing it. I flopped big time, and you don't want to flop like that. So prepare your 3 bullet points, your 5 bullet points, the 3 points that you want to get across during the interview, or the 5 points, at least 3. Prepare those. You want to write all those points down and practice them. and your points need to be concise, they need to be impactful, and they need to be a little bit catchy. You don't want to be boring. You want them to be a little bit more entertaining, not kind of entertaining, but more interesting, right? You don't want to sound boring, so prepare it in advance. And when you prepare your points in advance, you sound more confident. You would just all your points would just roll out your tongue. So it is important that you prepare them in advance. And the fourth thing you want to be prepared is the technical side, right? You want to make sure that if you are on, whether you have, mic, your mic, is it working? Your light, is that properly positioned? If you don't use light, are you sitting next to the window so the light will shine in properly? If you want to kind of explore different things, just look back on different episodes, check out my channel on different episodes. I have tips about light, about background and stuff like that. And especially if you are on Zoom, and a lot of people, I'm gonna make another probably episode on Zoom interview, right? You want to make sure your background is uncluttered and stuff like that. There are tons of tips on this channel. But anyway, technical stuff, make sure you are prepared. Make sure you have high-speed Wi-Fi internet, and make sure you check the weather in advance and where you live. If you live out in the boonies like me, and if the internet go out, what will you do? You need to have that option of rescheduling, or maybe you want to go to a place where the Wi-Fi is not going to be interrupted. So technical issue, make sure you have that down pat. And the last thing I want to say is storytelling is super impactful. Human, whether it is business or whether it is lifestyle type interview, people resonate with storytelling. And I'm going to tell you a story. We went to a speaker event one time, and this speaker come on stage, and we didn't realize why his speech is just so impactful until we look back and we kind of replay the speech over in our mind, and we're like, wait a minute, we love this speech the most because all he did, the whole speech, all he did was just telling stories after story after story, and the whole audience was just grew to his speech. But it's all just mini stories kind of tied up together. And you could do this too. You could prepare all your bullet points as story. So that's just something that you can do. I mean, you don't need to have all your bullet points in story, but at least some of them, prepare different stories that you can tell during the podcast interview. And that's the last tip, y'all. Well, actually, there's more. So that's the last tip for preparation for the interview, right? And when you're done with the interview, what do? I'm going to tell you a story. And I know that's coming. One of my podcast guests, Dr. P, she did an amazing thing. After we shoot the interview, what did she do? She went home, and the interview is not even live yet. She know the date, and what she did was, boom, she blast all her social media, her Facebook, her IG, her LinkedIn, with all the information. Hey, I was just on Mastery Podcast with Dr. Sas. It's going to be live. I'm so excited. It's going to be live this date and such date. Make sure you look out for the interview. And I was like, oh my gosh, Dr. P, you did perfect. I'm just going to use you as an example of what to do. And some of my podcast guests, they're just silent, cricket. They didn't say anything. Even the day of the interview, this is what you want to do too. And Dr. P, what she did was the day of the interview, she like, hey, I'm so excited. My podcast episode is live today. You all go check it out. Go listen here, go watch there. And you want to be your sounding board of your interview, right? Before, during, and after. Guess what? If you missed the interview, 2 days ago, I was live on YouTube channel, Mastery Podcast, this podcast. You want to really make sure the more people watch your interview, the more people listen to your interview, the better. So that's what you want to do. You want to tag the host, you want to tag your friend, you want to share the interview, you want to do all those great stuff, because the more you share, the more people see your interview. And don't forget, send a thank you note to your host. Say, hey, thank you for having me on the podcast interview. And during the interview, you also want to say, thank you for having me and all those stuff. But make sure you shoot out a thank you note just through email would be fine. You can even, one of my podcast guests, she sent me a plan as a thank you. And I was just, it touches my heart. So, to on a different level, right? And this, when you do go an extra mile like that, you will be invited back on that podcast, on that TV show. So make sure you send the thank you note, and that's what you do after the interview. And that's it. Make sure you put a comment below. How do you like this episode? What else you want to see? What else do you want to hear if you're listening to this? And make sure, if you're listening, make sure you check out my YouTube channel. With this episode, you can just listen, but some of the episode you just need to see. It's just one of those things. If you want to up level your interview even further, you can check out our Crush It on Cam event, where we have a 2 days event. You can click the link below and book a call with one of our team members and ask a bunch of questions. You can check out our website and be at our event, and then just practice your interview skills if you want that support. I encourage you, as a business owner, entrepreneur, you didn't go to school, right, for this stuff. So consider this like a mini school for you to grow your brand, for you to make even more of an impact on this earth. And that's it for now, y'all. Keep on crushing it. And I see you in the next episode. Bye for now.